His speech will be about pediatrics of smartphones, addiction among Omani University students. So I'm passing him the stage to deliver the speech. Welcome, Dr. Omar.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoy your lunch. Okay, today, inshallah, I'm going to present a pilot study about the predictors of smartphone addiction among Omani University students. I'm going to present on behalf of my colleagues, Dr. Sulaiman Al-Sabi, and Ms. Cherry Blade, and Ms. Khulud Al-Damiri, and the Associate Editor, Dr. Atika Khala. Okay, as all of you know, the technology invade our life. Now, no one can imagine his life without smartphone. Basically, the smartphone, we use it for everything in our life. We use it, especially in the COVID-19. As a student, they access their Moodle, Blackboard, websites, all the educational material through their smartphone. A plus to the traditional use of a smartphone that the young people that usually do, like they surf the internet, they socialize with their friends using Facebook, Twitter, and all of this kind of social media. Therefore, now the smartphone is part of our daily life activity. To give you an example of how much the smartphone takes place, for example, let us take Sultanate of Oman. Sultanate of Oman is almost a small country, and it consists of around 5 million population or people. The majority are young. There are over 7 million mobile phone connection. Imagine we are 5 million people, but there is 7 million mobile phone connection, which means 2 million extra. Out of this, 4.66 million people are internet users. What I mean here, they use their mobile phone to surf the internet through their mobile data, plus they use the internet as a regular internet user. Can you imagine which almost 11 million, which is 200% extra of the regular number. Of course, we take in our account that we have children that they already do younger than, for example, 10 years old or younger than 6. They don't know even how to use the internet. Of course, the majority of the Omani population are youth. So you can imagine how many people are using the mobile phones. Now, what drives this study? Basically, the negative consequences, the negative health consequences of using the smartphone. Of course, the consequences, they divided to different aspects. At the level of physical aspect, the people who are addicted on smartphone or use screens heavily, they have a dry eyes, carpal tunnel syndrome, repetitive strain injury, wrist, neck, back, and shoulder pain. Of course, associated with the migraine headache and thumb, index, and middle finger pain. At the psychological level, people who use the smartphone, they always have a difficulty in sleeping. They complain of insomnia, as well as they have certain mental illnesses like stress and anxiety. Therefore, the aim of this study was to study and to explore the predictors of smartphone addiction among Omani University. Of course, this is pilot study. Some people will argue, of my colleague argue me, this is more of associated factor more than a predictor, because the word predictors is always associated with the cohort study, longitudinal study. I would agree with that, but we use the team member agree to use the word predictors of smartphone addiction. This study was one of the preliminary study. There was only one study, the extensive literature search, which conducted in Oman in 2016, and it was only a prevalence study. Just they check the users of the internet, of the smartphone users, and the addiction scale. Method, we use a descriptive cross-sectional design, basically to examine the relationship between, between smartphone use and the associated factor. The participant, the convenience sampling technique was used. The inclusion criteria was to be able to read and write in English. The survey was delivered using the English language. All here Omani students are competent in English. there is a foundation year for all students before they join their regular study in Oman. And there is another condition: if people or students would like to bypass that foundation year, they need to score at least 6 or 5.5 overall in the IELTS. So most of the students who join the university are competent, regardless of their background, humanity or science background. Of course, they need to be registered in university, and they should have a smartphone. The exclusion criteria, we agree on only one exclusion criteria, which is if the patient diagnosed with anxiety or stress by a general practitioner. This was asked by a direct question: if he ever visited the psychologist or the psychiatrist doctor, and if he officially diagnosed with anxiety or stress. Of course, we use survey to conduct our study. We use a solvent formula, which is almost a very popular formula to test the prevalence of things, which is N, which is the N small is the number of sample, N is the total population, over between brackets 1 plus N, also the population, times square of the E, which is the marginal error. With the calculation, we almost have, of course, we pick Sultan Qaboos University. Sultan Qaboos University is the only public university in Oman, and all, regardless of the people, of course, in Oman, the education is for free, and all the students who complete their secondary school, they are eligible to apply for Sultan Qaboos University. Therefore, you will find a mixture of all students who belong to different governorate in Oman who can join the Sultan Qaboos University. Applying the formula, we end up that we need almost 391 respondents. Basically, we circulated 600 survey, and we received almost 404. As I mentioned, this is a pilot now. There is a second step, which we are going to circulate this survey to all the students around Oman. But the COVID-19 issue, it has its consequences, because we believe that this study, of course, conducted before COVID. But we believe now during the COVID, the results will be skewed more, and we will have more rates of internet addiction and smartphone use, especially because of COVID. Therefore, we decided as a team to postpone the project till the situation become better. Ethical consideration, this study was approved by ethics committee of the College of Nursing before the data collection began. Of course, this is the code. Of course, we are adhering to the Helsinki and Belmont Declaration ethical principles, which all of you know. Permission to use the survey, of course, we have two surveys used. The DAS survey, I will talk a little bit about it shortly, and the SAS, the Smartphone Addiction Survey. The permission was obtained from the originator of the surveys. Measures, we use some demographics data: gender, age, cumulative grade point, average, parents' level of education, of course, for the mother and the father, and the place of living. What we mean here by place of living, again, as a part of the service that government of Oman, which deliver to their students, we offer to the student to live inside the campus who join the universities, especially the girls students. So you will find students who are living in campus and students who are living off campus, and we decided to compare between them. As we said before, we are going to use different types. We use the depression, anxiety, and statistic scale. I like personally this scale. This scale developed by researchers in University of New South Wales in Australia in 1995. This scale, why I like it, because basically it is 42 items. There is another short form of this scale, but we use this 42 items. Basically, this scale measures 3 different constructs, which is measuring stress, depression, and anxiety. The scale, each 14 points, measuring independent construct. Of course, the scale consists of 4-point Likert scale, in which 0 meant does not apply to me and 3 apply to me very much. So the student, the can score on this scale is between 0 and 42 as a maximum. Of course, this scale is reliable and valid. Cronbach alpha for this scale was, for the anxiety scale, was 89, and for stress scale is 93. The scale is very widely used across all the cultures. Of course, there is also a translated version of the scale. And as I mentioned, it is available in public domain. The other one is the smartphone addiction scale. Again, there is two versions of this scale, the scale, the short version and the long version. We again use the long version of the scale. The survey was developed by One et al. 2013. It consists of 33 items divided to 6 subscales, which are daily life disturbances, positive anticipation, withdrawal, cyber place-oriented relationship, overuse, and tolerance. Respondent can answer on a 6-point Likert scale. Again, the score range between 33 to 198. Later, what we face in this scale, there is no cut-off point in this scale. Usually, this scale is on continuum. A greater scale indicate more serious smartphone addiction. And as a researchers, we were thinking to use the intra-quartile to divide the student to 3 or 4 groups according to the quartile range. But still, this is only thinking a process, and we are going to do to see what we are going to do in the actual study. The plan for data analysis, we use the SPSS version 23. Of course, we use descriptive variable. We use for the continuous variable mean and standard deviation. And for the categorical variable, we use frequency and percentages. We run the diagnostic test for the inferential statistics. Since our participant, the numbers were more than 100, and we run the normality test for the participants. All our dependent variables is normally distributed. Hence, of course, they are independent as well. We run the independent t-test to study the differences in mean between dichotomous variable like gender, for example, and the SAS score. And we used ANOVA test to use the differences in the mean between variable which consists of 3 levels, like for example, level of education, 3 levels and more. And again, the dependent variable SAS. SAS stands for smartphone addiction scale. Of course, for the 2 continuous variable, we use the Pearson correlation. Again, after that, we conduct our bivariate analysis. After that, we take, of course, we build our regression model. We build our regression model based on 2 facts. Based on the theoretical background, we study the previous literature and we check which variable can predict the SAS, the smartphone addiction use. At the same time, we use the statistical model. What all the data which were significant at the level of bivariate, we enter them to the initial model. Then we start using a stepwise model to reach to the final parsimonious model. Of course, again, all the assumptions were measured, like the dependent variable were normally distributed, multicollinearity were tested as well, the residual also for the expected and residual dependent variable were also checked. All of this we did. So we find, and there was of course a linear relationship between the dependent and the independent variable which have which they are on the continuous scale. All of this kind of assumption we checked before we start our regression model. Results, by the way, were very interesting. Our participant age were 21.3. Of course, the range of participants were between 18 and 26. The cumulative GPA, again, 2.7. The GPA range between 1.7 to 3.9. Cumulative GPA in Oman is ranging between 0 to 4. Basically, the maximum is 4. Smartphone addiction scale, which was 83.9. The lowest score was 33 and the highest was 165. None of our participants reached to 198. Anxiety was 22. Stress was 22.7. Depression was 22.3. Of course, the intention of this study not to measuring the different level of anxiety, stress, and depression. Another study is going to test that. Therefore, we kept everything at the scale level in order to enter them to the model. Gender, we have 35 almost participants, male student, and rest is a female student. The place of living, we have 54.5 5 they are living in campus and rest is off campus. We have almost 84% of our participants who are single and rest they are married. Here is very interesting finding. We study at the bivariate level. We studied the relationship or the difference in the mean score between the characteristic of participant and the SAS score. For example, we run the independent t-test to check whether there is a significant differences between male and female in regards to smartphone addiction scale. As you can see, almost they are similar. All of the value, all of this B value here is more than 0.05, which indicating that all the demographic variable there basically was not interfering in the smartphone use. Which later in the discussion, I will discuss this, which is there is some articles or previous research incongruent with this results and other previous study find different results. I will come to this later. At the Pearson level, we conduct the Pearson to study the relationship between the continuous variable. As you can see, the relationship between a smartphone and the stress was very significant, between smartphone and anxiety, depression. So between smartphone, stress, anxiety, and depression, the relationship were very significant. At the level of cumulative GPA and age, there was no significant relationship, basically. I am, of course, focusing here on smartphone because our smartphone is our dependent variable, and we are going to build our model to predict this dependent variable. Okay, we, as I mentioned, build our regression model. All this data which were significant at the bivariate level and the data which were theoretically significant, at least, we enter them to the model and we start using a stepwise model to exclude all not significant variable to reach to a decent model. As you can see, we end up with a good model. F was 36.611 and the model was overall significant. The adjusted R square is 26. So basically our model is expecting or predicting 26% of the variability of the dependent model, which is relatively good in nursing because you know the human characteristic is very complex and always whatever you try that to encapsulate all the independent variable which predict the dependent variable, always there is a unique human characteristics. Okay, this is the final model. As you can see, here is the word stress is just missed out. As you can see, the only significant predictor in our model which predict the using of smartphone addiction was stress. Anxiety and depression was not predictors for our model, or they were not significantly predicting the using of a smartphone addiction, which is very interesting. Of course, we asked also our students if they are preparing for the exam at the moment. And again, this one was not a significant predictor for our model. So basically, here our model is saying that when the stress increases, the smartphone use is increasing. It seems it is smartphone use is a coping mechanism to release student stress. In another direction, as we said, our study is a cross-sectional study. So our study is unable to really know which one the dependent and which one the independent variable. It is associated study in a way or another. So we recommend, as you will see later, to conduct a cohort study to see whether the stress which is responsible of using the smartphone use or the smartphone use which is responsible for causing stress for participants. The discussion, stress was a significant predictor of our smartphone use among university students. These findings were constant with the previous research. Many research found that the significant relationship between stress and smartphone use. But as I mentioned, which one proceeding, which one, here is the issue, and therefore we recommend to use more cohort longitudinal study to study this relationship. The average score of our smartphone addiction scale was 83.9%. Again, this is a very interesting that there is a study conducted in the same place at Sultan Qaboos University in 2016, and the same results were reached. Therefore, there is consistency. The number of smartphone use did not increase across the student, and this is interesting need for future research to study this. But of course, there is inconsistency between our finding and other findings in different area. Our students and their counterparts, some students in other area using more and other using less. We believe again there is a need for a multi-country study which is using the same survey and to study where the student basically spent their online surfing the internet, maybe the activity that they spent using the internet, where they basically spend their time. And the other issue is to have to use the same tool, which in this method we are standardizing the tool that we are using, and it will give us a better idea about the situation in the Middle East. Several factors come to play to explain the differences between the current study finding and the previous research. One of the suggestions is Oman has a wide internet coverage. The internet plans are relatively cheap, and more than half of the university students are living on the campus. When we say they are living in the campus, which means the internet is available for everyone for free. But again, we need more qualitative research to explore this issue and to see where basically our students are spending their time. There is another interesting result at the level of socio-demographic variable. Our study did not reveal any significant differences between males and females. There is certain study they are in line of our study, but again, there's other study which they found the female are more engaged or more significantly engaged or addicted to the smartphone. Culture, which play a role in usage pattern of purpose of use, maybe play here a significant role. Again, our study was only studying the prevalence, so we recommend another study to see the impact of culture on using the smartphone and basically where the students are spending their time when they are using the smartphone. Our recommendation, we have different recommendations that come up with this study. The first recommendation, to establish or initiate a campaign to increase the student awareness about the negative effects of using the smartphone. And always I believe and always I advocate for that, we need to have an elective course at the level of university which discuss the youth health issue, and one of the important health issue that should be integrated and included in this course is the using of the smartphone use. Lastly, we need to offer a counseling for students. We need to increase the student awareness. We need also to shift our student attention to more of activity resources. At the same time, we need to encourage our students to visit the counseling student center at the level of university. So maybe they will be able to help them to overcome the problem of smartphone addiction. Limitation, there was an inherited limitation for this study. One of the most important is the type of this study. It is a cross-sectional design, which is this study unable to establish a causal relationship between the study variable. There is more study are required like a cohort or longitudinal study or at the experimental level design to establish a cause and effect relationship. At last, our conclusion showed that a significant positive correlation was found between smartphone overuse and stress among the university students. It is important again to promote healthy ways to use a smartphone. We are not against using the smartphone, of course. I'm sure my colleagues here support this, but again, we also opposing overusing of smartphone, and to develop awareness plan target this issue. Students should support it in reducing their level of anxiety, of course. And lastly, thank you all, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Well, actually, thank you, Dr. Omar, for this informative topic. Really, it was a wonderful session. Now, I would like to ask my fellow colleague if they have any questions. Please, you can write it on the chat box, please. or you can raise your hand. Actually, we have one comment from Prof. James Jordan. He wrote that in the US schools or have students use focus.
Maybe some context.
Maybe someone
So-
is typing now.
Can you hear me? This is Jim Jordan.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Oh,
About
okay. So
Go
maybe some
ahead.
context to that question, because the phones in many of these schools, a lot of the students are taking notes on them, using them for their internet. So they're actually using them for their schoolwork. So that's the positive side. The negative side is the distraction. So there's been a whole bunch of little apps and software that have been launched in the US that you turn it on and you can't get to social media and you can't get to some of these other particular software packages. And I have to admit, as I was writing my last book, I used it myself because I would get distraction. I'm wondering if that could be an interesting variable in your next level of investigation.
is very interesting, Doctor. We are using it when we conduct our exam. It's a way of, proctoring our student. But
Yes.
unfortunately, it is not available for all the students all the time because mostly the software need to be paid and universities do not support this. But I agree with you absolutely. We can conduct an experimental design to see what is the impact of using such programs on reducing the level of the smartphone addiction and level of anxiety. Absolutely, it is a very nice idea. Thank you so much for you.
Any more questions? Okay, I have one question for you, Dr. Omar, regarding the addiction using for software or the mobile phone for the Omani University students. In your opinion, what do you think is the main reason for you for this addiction?
We need to agree on this. World is moving. We belong to the previous generation where we think that we can live without our mobile phone. But this new generation, they cannot imagine themselves without using the mobile phone. This is one of the most important things that we need to put in our heads when we approach these students. But at the same time, we need to teach them when and how to use the smartphone. We have certain students who are using games, for example, for 24 or 12 hours continuously. We need to find a way to convince these students to not use their smartphone. Even sometimes when the lecturer is playing, you don't see them. They all of them over the moon checking. There is a term that we are using it called nomophobia. Nomophobia is when you're using the smartphone basically. For example, when you are connected to the Facebook, a student always they are curious to see what is happening to their post. They need to follow up when they post something in Twitter or Facebook. They are very curious to see how the other student will respond to this post. So they are like the likes basically, that all of the hearts that they collect. So we need to accept this as an academician, but at the same time we need to increase their awareness to control this desire, this appetite to use more and more smartphones.
Thank you very much, Dr. Omar. Our next speaker will be Mr. Regression